grown up with farming people, you never ever complain about it. You complain inwardly, but you would never do it outwardly because you know people count on it. So it does other people good, whatever discomfort it may cause you. It's a little town that has wonderful weather for the most part, but it's a town that is deeply in fear of disappearing. We're population's down to about 1,973, and we used to be well up over 2,000, and now we're afraid that we may just dry up and blow away, and all of our stories be lost, all of our history gone, as if it never ever existed. We do have a history in Lake Woebegone. We have things that we would be glad to tell people if they would stop and see us, but the freeway, of course, goes nowhere near there, and neither does the state highway, and so we very seldom see new faces. Meanwhile, our children, whom we've taken great pains to educate and teach them persistence and patience and all the things that are much more valuable than talent, go away and they get an education, and it's too specialized, so we can't really use it in our town. They don't go away and learn to become carpenters and electricians and farmers. They go off and they learn how to be neurosurgeons and astrophysicists and trial lawyers, and we have no use for them. Satirists, we have no use for that, and so off they go, and we never see them again. No, we worry about this. There was a busload of 50 people came into Lake Woebegone on a rainy day about 3 months ago, and they got off the bus. They had a flat tire, double rear right tires, and they all got off the bus and they ran into the Chatterbox Cafe, and Dorothy and Darlene got them a grilled cheese and chili. We couldn't find a spare in our town at all, and so they sat down there, and Eloise Krebsbach, our mayor, was thinking. This was the day before the end of the fiscal year, and she decided that if we could get them to stay overnight, we could count them as population. And that would boost us up over 2,000, and then we would have this boost, and we'd be able to go on from there. Well, she tried to interest them in staying in the Night Arrest Motel in Lake Woebegone, and they walked over there, but when they met Art and they asked about Wi-Fi and found out that there was none, that was it. They got back on the bus. They drove that thing on the rims 31 miles back to a hotel that had Wi-Fi, so they could sit up in their rooms and they could look in their email for whatever they might find there, and they could surf the internet. They could look up cat videos. They could look up Cat Stevens and Steven Spielberg, and look at parts of Jaws on YouTube, and look at a dental website, and Dennis Rodman, and Hot Rods, and On the Road with Jack Kerouac, and The Wax, Women's Army Corps, and look up Corpse. How long does it take to decompose? And then look up Franz Joseph Haydn, the natural logic of surfing the web. And 5 hours later, you're sitting there looking at a website about how to talk to giraffes. No, they could not be persuaded to stay. If they had stayed, we would have shown them things. We would have shown them the statue of the unknown Norwegian there on the main street, this granite statue of a heroic man pointing off to the west. There was a tornado in Lake Woebegone about 15 years ago, and it lifted up 4 crates of freight off a loading dock about 7 miles away, and it blew it into the air, and it opened up, and 65 bowling balls of all different colors came falling on Lake Woebegone, and nobody was struck by them. We still have the bowling balls, and we could show you that. It also lifted up a tea train, sucked it out, a tea tray, out of the kitchen of the Lutheran church, and it dropped it in a plowed field about 1.5 miles away. No scratch on it, no crack whatsoever. This miracle. We're happy to show you that. And it blew a stalk of quackgrass into the left ear of the unknown Norwegian, deep into the granite. This was 15 years ago, and they have treated it with herbicide ever since. And it still is lush and green. Every spring it sprouts anew. Doesn't your faith in resurrection gain from hearing this story? If there is a record somewhere for the longest living legume blown by natural force into a statue, this would be it. It's there in our town. And all sorts of things in this town. Babe Ruth came through here and played his last baseball game. This was in October of 1937. He came through on a barnstorming tour with a team called the Sorbitol All-Stars, and they came in on a private railroad train. They backed 6 miles down the sidetrack and into Lake Woebegone. He got off the train. He was so sick he could barely walk. He was just sweating like crazy. He sat in the dugout for 8.5 innings, and then they were chanting his name, and so he got up out of the dugout. Babe Ruth, the most famous man in America, and he, using his cane, his bat as a cane, he walked up to the plate and he stood there, and Mr. Schumacher on our town team glared at him and threw one right high and inside, right under the chin, and Babe did not flinch. And he just looked at Mr. Schumacher, and the next pitch came in over the plate about knee high, and he swung and he drove that thing out into the clouds. It went over that fence, and an army of boys went tearing after it, and they ran through that cornfield and that pasture, and they never found it, not that day, nor the day after, nor in weeks after that, nor the year after that. It never was found. Babe Ruth's last home run. We could show you the field where it landed. There are houses built there now, but I mean, you know, we could point this out to you how far we think it might have gone. It's a great mystery. It was all in my town. If you had gone to the Night Arrest Motel, you could have met Art. And Art was driving the pontoon boat that time when the 24 Lutheran pastors riding on the pontoon boat capsized in the wake of a speedboat that was towing a young man on water skis who was holding a parasail up above his head and on water skis, and he was trying to get up in the air so that he could drop this bowling ball, which was hanging from his belt down between his knees. Not a good idea, but there it was. And it contained the ashes of his grandmother, and her last wish was that it be dropped in the far south end of Lake Woebegone. And he lost his balance in the wake of the speedboat, which was going at high speed, and he fell off the skis, but he was lashed to the tow rope, and so he was towed underwater at high speed for about 400 yards, and the force of the water tore the bowling ball and the red swim trunks from his body, and then he rose and he flew through the air, a naked man flying like something in Greek mythology. I mean, you never see this, and there he was, and he went around twice, and he almost collided with a hot air balloon that was towing a verse from Scripture, "For all have sinned and come short of the glory of God," piloted by Wilbur Scott, who's a famous aviator. Maybe you haven't heard of him, but he's from our town, and he set out years before that to set a new record for solo flight, length of the Mississippi. He started in New Orleans, and he flew north, and he was heading for the headwaters up in Bemidji, and he went a little detour off over his hometown, expecting to see people out there waving flags and setting off rockets to greet him, and nobody was there. It just hurt him so badly. And he descended to 1,500 feet, and he set off a signal rocket out the cockpit window, and he blew off the struts of his left wing, and he went into a spiral, and down he came, the wings smoking and flames, and he would have died, but he struck a duck decoy on the lake. It was an 18-foot-long, hollow-body, fiberglass duck decoy that Jack Christensen had invented. Jack was on shore. He was steering it with the help of small ropes. This 18-foot-long, hollow-body duck decoy in which the hunter would ride inside the decoy and pedal and turn a propeller and look out through a periscope in the duck's neck and look out, and when he saw incoming, he would kick out a trapdoor under the duck's tail. And Jack expected to get rich off this invention, but this plane went spiraling down and crashed into it. His life was saved, but that didn't matter. To Jack, Wilbur took up then, the idea of spreading the gospel using a hot air balloon. I don't know what the connection is there. Jack was so hurt by this disaster that he took up drinking, which had been just a light hobby before. And now he became the town drunk, which is a competitive position, and you got to really work at it. And he took up with a woman named Mavis, whom he'd met in the sidetrack tap. One night she was there, she asked him to dance, and he did, and then after a couple of dances, she said her leg was killing her and she had to sit down. So they sat down in a booth, and she reached up under her skirt and she unstrapped her leg. It was a wooden leg, and she took it off and she set it down on the table. He could not help but notice that a lot of men had carved their initials in the leg, but he wasn't going to ask about that. She said, "I'm just so perspiry," she said, and she reached up and she took her wig off. She was completely bald, and then she sneezed, and her glass eye flew out of her eye socket. She said, "My left eye comes out about 8 inches. The optic nerve stretches. I can look behind me and see if somebody's coming. If you would like to see it." And he did, actually. He was attracted to her. Who knows how? He took up with her. She became a girlfriend, which really disturbed his wife, Mildred. A Sunday school teacher. She had been one for 20-some years, and she was a teller at the Lake Woebegone State Bank, and that really threw her for a loop. And so about 6 months after that, she took off in the middle of the night with a big suitcase that was stuffed with $100 bills packed tight, almost $250,000 right there in one suitcase. And she got on a plane in Minneapolis and went down to Buenos Aires, and she bought herself a house, a big stucco house with a pool and a high wall around it and vines covering it, in a neighborhood that she found out later was populated about half by Sunday school teachers from the Midwest. She changed her name to Mercedes, and she dyed her hair black, and she took up smoking Turkish cigarettes, and she drank frozen daiquiris and hired a man named Pablo to come and rub oil on her back and to make her drinks and who knows what else. And the bank took their house in Lake Woebegone, so Jack had to go out and live out in the woods in his hunting shack, out beyond the muskeg and the birch trees. He lived out there with his big dog, Broccoli, who was the only vegan dog we ever knew in town. Unusual. Wonderful dog, really smart dog. He took care of Jack. He lived out there with his kerosene heater and beer, and cases of Jim Beam, and Dinty Moore beef stew and whatever else a bachelor needs. He was out there. I knew him, of course. They lived just down the street from me growing up. I knew his daughter Julie, who was kind of my girlfriend, I guess you might say. I mean, not like nowadays, with you. We didn't do stuff, I mean, well, once. I guess we were about 13, she was probably 14 or 15, and we were just sitting around on the grass, and she asked me if I wanted to wrestle, which I couldn't imagine doing. A girl. And we were brought to revere girls, and then she was on top of me, and she got me in a scissors hold. She was really strong. She had long legs, and she was wearing green shorts and a Girl Scout T-shirt, and she got me down, and she got me in a headlock, and she had her one hand locked on her wrist, and I could not get that off me. We were rolling around on the grass, and then I had this revelation that changed my life as I look back on it. I thought to myself, why do I want to get her off me? What is the meaning of winning here? So, Jack lived out in the hunting shack with his dog. I came across him, I think a couple of years after that. I was about 15. I was on a camping trip with my Boy Scout troop. Our Scoutmaster Einer thought we ought to go camping in January. So, like fools, we did, and pitched a wall tent and took our suppers, in tinfoil, little hamburger, raw hamburger, and potatoes, and we built a big fire and put these tinfoil things in there. He said the Ojibwe did it that way. I don't think so, but... And then night fell about 5 o'clock, and it was bitterly cold. We checked the temperature when we went out there. It was 30 below zero, and that was on a thermometer that only went down to 30 below zero. So it was very cold. We had no warm sleeping bags like today. We just had army blankets that our mothers had sewn together, and we lay out there in a big heap like sled dogs. And you were afraid to fall asleep for fear you wouldn't wake up, but I fell asleep. And then I did wake up, and it was about 3 in the morning, and I had to pee so badly. I got up and went out through the tent flap, and snow was falling, and the moon, just a sliver of moon. I went all down the shore, and I went through the birch woods and down a long ravine, and then up over a hill and down another ravine. I come from very modest people, and I didn't want anybody to see me, out there. Though when it's that cold, there isn't that much to be seen, really. And the male organ sort of burrows up alongside the pancreas. But you extract it and you get it out, and my gosh, the water pressure is just astonishing. When you're 14 years old and your bladder is full and it just shoots out of you steaming hot, and then 14 feet away it turns into ice crystals. They fall like confetti on New Year's Eve, and you're waving it back and forth, doing circles and diagrams. And 87 years ago. And then I was so taken with what I was doing. I forgot which way I had come, and there were no landmarks or anything. Everything looked the same to me, and the moon was very dim, and there was a mist in the air, and I couldn't see any sign of tent or a fire or anything, no lights at all. And I thought I was probably going to die, and then I heard him coming, and he was singing. There once was an Indian maid who never was afraid of goons and ginks and company finks and deputy sheriffs who made the raids. And he saw me and he said, "Jesus, Mary, Joseph, you could die out here." So I got on the back of his barrel stave skis, and he skied off about 75 feet away. Here was his shack, and he opened the door, and this blast of kerosene heat, and the big dog came out, the big yellow lab, Broccoli, and I almost would have died except for him. So you remember this thing for a long time. I went to his funeral. He died about 10 years after that. He died on his way to the sidetrack tap on summer night, and he was walking fast because it was raining, and he was walking too fast, and he got a heart attack, and he grabbed hold of the parking meter right there on Main Street. There's only one. They just put up one as an experiment, and he grabbed hold of it, and he slipped down on the sidewalk and died. The bartender called the constables called the sheriff called the ambulance called the coroner, fire department came, red, blue flashing lights, yellow ribbon, walkie-talkies, all of that, this whole emergency scene that Jack loved more than anything else. Such a shame that he should miss this, and miss it by just 10 minutes. But he was dead, and we had to go through his shack and find things of value, and Broccoli was very upset and barking, especially when we picked up this shoebox sitting in the corner, and we opened it. It was full of newspapers all wrapped there, and then in plastic, here was this baseball. It was a baseball. And it was kind of flat on one side, and signed by Kennesaw Mountain Landis, and we thought, well, that would appear to be it, wouldn't it? And it's probably worth a great deal of money. And who should the money go to? Broccoli seemed to think it should go to him. But other people thought about Julie Christensen, who had gone down to the cities years before. She was Miss Liberty in the 4th of July parade, and marching down the street, and, with a greenish sort of coppery gown, a long gown, and carrying the torch and the tablet in her crook of her elbow and the big pointed crown, and she was marching along Statue of Liberty, holding up the gown a little bit, and then she was startled by a voice. She heard a voice from the parking meter. It was her mother saying, "Julie, I need you now." And she dropped the hem of the gown, and she walked right up the inside of this gown and out the neck. She tore the whole thing to pieces, and it fell down in the street. She picked it up, she put it over her arm. Some people remember that she was naked. She was not. She was wearing underwear, but the guy who was playing Thomas Jefferson in the parade, Bob Anderson, wearing a wig and everything, he put his big cape around her and helped her to the end of the parade route, and there they went off together, and in the course of human events, and in the pursuit of happiness, she had a baby, and she left town, of course, as women did back then, and we never saw her after that, because her mother was in Buenos Aires and her father was dead. Well, they wanted me to take this baseball down to Minneapolis to have it assessed at an auction house, and so I did. I needed to go down there anyway because I had an appointment at a clinic down there. I had this procedure done a couple months before down there, and so it was prostate thing, and I see some of you men leaning forward. They call it a procedure because they use a laser instead of a knife, but they take out most of the prostate tissue and they replace it with brain tissue, so that up here can talk to down there, which is a good idea. I don't know why they didn't think of it sooner. And so you go in and you have to drink this liquid the night before to clean out your bowels, and you go in, and this old woman my age scanned my abdomen with an electronic scanner to see if I was all clear, and I was not. And so she had to finish the job herself. I put on a gown. It was a flowery gown. They don't have a special one for men, you know, with sailboats and anchors or anything. You just wear a grandma gown, and you lie on an examining table with your knees drawn up, and she gets out her kit, which was a plastic bag there full of liquid and a nozzle like on a Ready Whip can. And she says, now you're going to feel pressure. Oh my, yes. What a vivid memory. You're going to feel pressure, but I want you to hold it in until you feel this irresistible urge to vacate. And then she lifts up the hem of your little gown, and whoa. Wow. You hear liquid gushing, and you feel pressure. And right at that moment, she said, I just have to tell you that I really enjoy your radio show. She said, you know, we grew up together. You didn't recognize me when you came in. It was her. It was Julie. I said, oh my gosh, I have such a surprise for you. And not anything at all like this surprise that you gave me. I took the baseball to an auction house, and they indeed thought it would be worth about $200 grand, it having been Babe Ruth's last home run, after all, and it was in good shape except for being flat on one side. But it wasn't Julie who got the money. It should have gone to Mildred, who was still alive in Buenos Aires, and she and Jack had never divorced. But the bank took it and gave it to the insurance company that had met the claim all those years before, all except for $1,100 of this money, which Eloise Krebsbach got her hands on. And she hired a company to come in and drill a hole in the left ear of the unknown Norwegian. And they pumped herbicide into that thing over the course of 3 days. Pumped it until the whole side of his face was turning orange. This was a year and a half ago, and I'm happy to say that sprout of quackgrass is growing even more lush today than it has been in the past. It gives you hope, people. It gives you hope. If that quackgrass can live off of granite, then there's hope for the rest of us. Even living in a place like Lake Woebegone, even sitting out in the rain, there still is hope for us. That's the news from Lake Woebegone, where all the women are strong, all the men are good looking, and all the children